Good morning, everybody. This is the third day of our conference on the reuse of churches, and we're going to start with a round table about churches in the Hanover region. First of all, I would like to let the people who may be new let them know that our colleague Paul Post, he was supposed to be here this morning too, but unfortunately he's fallen ill, so we had to do without him yesterday, and this will continue today. So what we know so far, he is too ill to participate. We're very sorry about that, but we are doing our best to sub for him and do the program without him. Now I would like to present you the people participating in our round table, our panel, so to say. This is Mr. Roger Ahrens of the office Ahrens and Grabenhorst Architects, and he is going to start, and he's going to present the Christuskirche and the Gustav Adolf Kirche, which has now become a synagogue, Etz Chaim. We have already mentioned this yesterday evening, and in our evening talk, we already mentioned this case, which is very interesting. So these two church buildings are also represented by the users, which is Stefanie Sonnenburg. So she is in the center of my table. She works at the Christuskirche, and Mr. BRUCKMANN of the Liberal Jewish congregation, who represents this project and is active in interreligious dialogue. I'm going to present the other panelists later when we come to their projects and their respective congregations or church buildings. Now we have half an hour in order to talk about the Etz Chaim, the liberal Jewish congregation, and to talk about Christuskirche Christ Church in Hanover, which has become a concert hall for a girls' choir. Mr. Ahrens, would you like to start? Good morning, Mrs. Gothe. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak here. I would like to use this possibility in order to present these two projects. It's a very nice idea that you are able to talk about so very interesting projects. I would like to start, well, you said Christuskirche and liberal Jewish congregation. On my paper, it was the other way around, but yes, that's fine. So this is why I would like to start with this one, with the liberal Jewish congregation in Hanover. And I'd like to give you a short presentation on that. This is a building. It's a typical representative of the 60s. It was built in 1965 to 67. And it then in 1970, the use started. It's a typical building of that time. You can see the photos. Some people said this is kind of like a skiing table, or they can go skiing on that slope. So people had interesting comments on this, and the room, the hall for the services is actually on the first floor, and on the ground floor you have other rooms for the congregation to be used as a church hall, for example. So that was already quite interesting. And we will talk about all the functions of the various rooms and spaces of this building here. This is the sketch from this neighborhood with the entrance to the cemetery. Maybe some of you may know Hanover. So this is the interior. In 2007, this church was deconsecrated after long talks whether the church should be sold at all, if it could be sold. And we had many talks where the liberal Jewish community at the end said, yeah, it's right, this is a good building. We can imagine coming here and having our center here. You see the interior when it was gutted with the typical elements of the 60s. But as you can see, for our perspective, it was a bit, well, they needed some light. We thought it needs more light and also a new design. Then if you read about the topic of Jews and the Jewish religion, that was actually quite something which was quite new for us and really interesting. I don't want to go into detail, but it was something well, we talked with the representatives of the liberal Jewish congregation, and we had a very intense dialogue with them over, I believe it was 2 or 3 years, where we talked quite a lot. We learned a lot of things, and there was this joke in this congregation. You ask a Jew for an opinion, and in the end you have 11 opinions if you ask just one person. And that was a bit what we realized, but still the dialogue was quite good. So then quite soon we started to search for a new design, a new vision for this former church. How could that be presented as a new synagogue building in the city under the premise that we have a very limited budget for a large project, in fact? So what we started with was that we wanted to redesign this strange sculpture and to have this upwards feeling of the construction. You can see it here, the tip of it at the top. And we also couldn't really do that much with a limited budget to change the overall image or the overall picture. This was a model that we used just to show you the beginning of the project. This is the church building here. Then there is this ground floor, which is a church hall and various other smaller rooms. And this is a former residence. Now it's used as a kindergarten, this building. And all of this belongs to this church and is now part of the liberal Jewish congregation. So what did we do? The most important change, this is a sketch of the building. Here at the top, you can see that was where the bells were. Here below on the ground floor, you had a small church hall with a stage. And then on the first floor, the big main church hall with a gallery here in black. And in this room, in this space, we introduced a completely new construction, which is an interior space, a synagogue space. What's red is the new walls or new elements that were added. It started with the exterior shell. You can see the line of the old roof that looked like a ski slope. And so we changed that, and this is the new synagogue shape. Here at the head of the building, you had a library that was introduced, and this only dealt with Jewish literature. And I believe this is something which has become a really nice space, a great room, which is in here. So this is the new building after we changed a couple of things. You can see, well, the synagogue room is doesn't really have much light. It's just these two windows. Also on the other side, everything else is just on the interior. Of course, I mean, there are security aspects even at that time, unfortunately, now even more so. So this is the security aspect also made sure that we couldn't have more windows there. Then we dealt with various design elements. This was a great chance to decorate the synagogue and have, for example, in menorah, this chandelier and the place where the Torah is kept. So we had various designs, and we developed this entrance, this great door and the portal. And again, this is before the main room. This is the main synagogue room. This space has a very clear symmetrical orientation. In the former church hall of the Evangelical Church before, they had a different orientation. I don't know why. It wasn't really straight, but I think maybe in the 60s, people didn't want to have a very straight axis or symmetrical. But we thought that this orientation is actually quite good, and that this straight line orientation is a good idea for this use. So this is where the Torah rolls are kept, and then you have this kind of stage and the chandeliers, and this is a height of 3 meters, so we have light fixtures. These are glass ceilings with a covered with a coating, with a foil that have a very textile character. And this way you have a very nice, comfortable light, which isn't too harsh. So we did a lot to improve the lighting situation with artificial light and make it a nice light. So the place where the Torah rolls are kept, this opens up, and this has all been designed until the textile that has been used and the print. So these were all elements that we don't see every day in our architectural work. That was quite interesting too. So this is then towards the other side. You can see the central synagogue space. And then I would like to show you another element. This is the tree in the interior yard. This is what we can say, the tree of life. Of course, this tree was there before. We kept it, and this is now the church hall around it, the center around it, the other rooms, but we kept the main room structure, so the tree could be kept where it was. And just to finish, this is then the entrance when you see the Jewish community at night. Great. I hope I'm in time, and I would then jump right to the next project, which in Hanover it isn't that far away, maybe 3 or 4 kilometers away from where we just were. And let's continue with the second project here. This is again a map where the church is in the city. I believe you can see the importance right away of this location. It's Christuskirche in Hanover. It's really extremely central. It's visible from all axes. It's a landmark. It is a listed building. It was in 1859 till 1864, built by Konrad Wilhelm Haase. In Hanover, he's quite well known because he built several other buildings. He's kind of the local architect of Hanover in that time, in that century. He did a lot with brick architecture. And the building itself is very richly decorated with bricks and with other elements, design elements. These are the original plans. And it was built also as a residential church for the King of Hanover. So Christuskirche has then been destroyed in the war, well, partly, not completely, but partly. There were some elements that were lost. And in the 60s, it was repaired. Over the last centuries, it was maintained with subsidies. Well, the exterior was maintained, but which is an ever ongoing project, like the cathedral in Cologne. Once you start, you will never finish with maintenance. But the interior was a problem. It couldn't really be used anymore. I think my colleague maybe tell us a bit more about that. There was a project for the World Exhibition, but in overall, the interior structure was just not fit for use and couldn't really be used for anything and needed more work.
Then, in parallel with the girls' choir, we were in contact with the girls' choir, who was looking for a new rehearsal center and performance center. And then at some point, they entered into contact with the representatives of the Christuskirche, and we reflected on the possibility of turning such a church space, which was very strongly characterized by this church architecture, into a rehearsal space for at least 100 singers, which would be compatible with this architecture. And this was one of the first design sketches where we said, yes, it's possible. We would construct a podium, which would be at this place, and then there would be the organ, and basically like a red carpet, which unfurls over these steps, and of course has some distance to the historic church walls. This idea was then turned into a concrete project, which this sketch here shows. It's always impressive for me that this intervention, in this sketch at least, looks relatively reduced. Well, we have these red brownish interventions here. This is the podium, the platform, if you will, and you will see how it works then in the church space. This layout, this plan shows you that at a height of 8 meters over the actual floor, the upper level where we have the organ, there are tower spaces, tower rooms, further additional rehearsal rooms. And then during the further development of this project, the fundamental idea of the podium, which was supposed to be this red carpet, was maybe too radical. Originally, we did not want chairs, and we wanted something else. But of course, you know that through different uses, it's not possible to avoid having seats for people. So with the girls' choir and the congregation of the Christuskirche, additionally, there is also a choir center. So there were 3 builders, 3 organizations which had to reconcile here. The girls' choir basically invested into a foreign building and a new building. So lawyers took at least 3.5 years to make it possible. So a very intense dialogue with 3 parties, and of course the interests were rather diverse, because it was clear that this building was supposed to remain a church, and we focused on the attempt to have an additional use, a multifunctional use with the building, and to therefore develop more opportunities. And maybe Mrs. Sonnenburg will explain that you have to respect the energy, the acoustics, etc. All of this was taken into account here. So ultimately, the project looked the way you can see it here. To the left and to the right, these are walls which are supposed to improve the acoustics. The organ, sadly, is still being renovated, and the original installations were kept the way they were in their original state. Do I still have time? I would be thankful if you could finish now, so we can hear from the users. Okay, so this just as some spatial impressions. The rehearsal space below the church room. I said how small the intervention looks in the sketch, but you can see that it wasn't really a small intervention. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ahrens. I would now like to use the order in which the former churches were presented. So, Mr. Bruckmann, we would like to start with you. What are your experiences in the liberal Jewish congregation? What is it like living there? Yes, I would like to do that. It's very nice living there. You already mentioned that I work for the foundation, but I also spend a lot of time there as in my role for the congregation, and I can say that we have been living there or working there for a few years, so we've really arrived, and it's become a place for the people who are part of our congregations, which are a few hundred, and they call it a part of their home. I think we can say it like that. And I talked to members who were there from the beginning, and they said that the transition was a little bit unusual. We had a lot of contact also with the parish of the former church, but there was a good exchange. And I have to say that of all synagogues, I find ours very modern and very user-friendly. We have this kindergarten and nursery, different groups, age groups, which find a place in these buildings, so it's not a problem. Thank you. You already mentioned these, or Mr. Ahrens mentioned these security aspects. I also remember, because we visited you before the conference, maybe I should say that originally we planned to have a trip, an excursion from all those from the conference who would be interested to visit these buildings and meet you on site and experience these buildings. I had planned this with Mareike Rüssmann from the foundation. I was asked in the chat for details. You can find a small documentation of these 5 church buildings we're talking about today on our website, as it is still presented as a promenade, but you can use it as a virtual promenade now. So my question, as a synagogue, you have higher security demands. Are there still situations where you can open up to your environment, through the forecourt? We do try to stay in contact with the neighborhood and with the neighboring associations with which we work. We do not have a day where we open our doors, basically. It's not possible, but we have summer festivities, for example, where we say, okay, we'll invite the people. So we do have security measures, but still the people can enter. Maybe they have to let our security people check their bags. It's not possible to not do that in Germany, sadly, but we do try to do our best here, because we are at the center of this neighborhood. We are part of the landscape there, and we want to stay in contact with the neighborhood. So through our security work, we already are in contact with the people, because they know, well, there are security measures. What does it have to do with our neighborhood? We have a question in the chat here. Before the conversion, before the transformation, were there discussions with the neighborhood, with the people living around you? I do not have any knowledge about that. Maybe Mr. Ahrens can answer that. To my knowledge, of course, there were conversations with representatives of the congregation of the parish of the Gustav Adolf Kirche. I don't think it went beyond that, but at least the parish was, or the congregation had a strong anchor point in this neighborhood. And we had a lot of conversations with them before the actual transformation, before the handing over of the church. If you have questions to the roundtable, please express yourself. My question to Mr. Ahrens: during this symposium, we often talked about the fact that these modern churches sometimes have more difficulties to be accepted, to be appreciated. What is your experience when dealing with this modern building structure, this strange nickname, the ski jump or ski boot? It maybe shows that many people were maybe not as enthusiastic about the form. So what is your experience with this building structure? For example, regarding insulation, maybe this has been said about concrete churches that it's difficult. What do you think? We always try, before getting rid of structural elements or materials, we try to look at the value of a material. And there you can say that these churches from the 60s and 70s have a high material value in what they have, what they consist of. It is a problem that regarding energy consumption, they are not very well equipped. And that is often a reason for the fact that these churches are not used anymore, because the utilities bills, the operating costs are very high. So we did have energy renovations, windows, insulation, etc. These are things we have to take into account, and I think it's important to intensely look at to take an intense look at the materials and to think about what you can do with it. Sadly, with renovation measures, there are often errors that are made, well-intentioned, well, there are good intentions, but maybe it's not right for the building. So you have to take a closer look at what is possible. Thank you. Okay, now let's talk about the Christuskirche. Mrs. Sonnenburg is the pastor of the Christuskirche, as I said, and she has a few slides which show the use of this space. We can't hear you yet. Please unmute yourself. I'm glad to show you the perspective of the users in a few images, I hope. I'm working on it. Wonderful. We can already see the screen. I hope you can see the image. This congregation was experienced the merger of the mother and the daughter church, so to speak, the filial church, the branch church. I'm sorry, the audio is very bad. I'm trying my best. So this church was managed by 3 partners, and so it experienced a strong transformation of its sacral space, and this transformation was also a renewal for the church, which had also experienced transformations in its neighborhood in a positive sense. So you can see that it also has a warming effect. You can see the service with the traditional light singing. You can see that in this Gothic space, the central aisle opened up this space, and now we have this sort of gallery, this sort of podium, so the altar space is very liberated. You can see even during the Corona pandemic what effect it has. If you take a look at it, everybody has a clear view. So old and new have merged to a good symbiosis. It was a renewal for the congregation, but look at how magnificent, from the perspective of the user, what your view is here. A concert which is supposed to represent what it is now. It is a church with 3 uses: a congregation church, a choir church. You can see the church choir on the podium, where youth choirs and children's choirs also perform. Of course, we also had losses for 5 years in the old foyer, the northern portal. We did not have any furnishings, So the congregation had the sense of being relegated to the servants' entrance, basically. But the new situation has brought more wins, more gains. In 2009, Mr. Ahrens described a situation where there was a need for action.
So the girls' choir could sing in this space. The city and the region, they worked together to enable this project. And once more, this is your interpreter speaking. Unfortunately, the internet connection of the speaker is extremely bad. We don't hear nearly enough to translate well. We're doing our best, but please excuse that this is a bit choppy at the moment. So we tried to have a long-term perspective for the youth. There are still some congregation members left. There are 2 historic churches in the Nordstädter congregation. And the question is, what will be the future? Who will shape the future? And there are 3 partners active in trying to find a perspective for the future. It is, however, an organizational burden because the congregation is no longer alone. And also the status of the girls' choir is unclear. So it is good when money is coming from various projects, but it is also difficult to the question what we do with it, who receives it. There are many things that need to be paid for, staff needs to be paid. And even if you have a lot of love for this building, you need money to pay for things. But this is an example, even under pandemic conditions. You can see here the pictures to have choirs singing with social distancing. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Sonnenburg. Yes, well, the role of a pastor is quite different in this case compared to a usual role the pastor usually plays in such a space that needs to be shared with others. Maybe you could answer that? Your new role under these circumstances? Because I know when we talked before, you said it's kind of like sharing a flat with your flatmates, and there are various partners in the same building. Yes, it's a bit like that. So it's kind of like sharing a flat. Everybody has to adjust, and we make plans who can use the building at which point of time. So we have a basic cooperation agreement, but we still need to communicate when we plan to use the space and what we want to do. So we always have to keep talking to each other to communicate when and how we use the space. So it's really about management. So the congregation is responsible for the basic maintenance, for the interior space, while the region is responsible for the exterior. But the girls' choir is also responsible for their spaces. So whenever somebody wants to use the church from the outside, we have to talk to two partners. So it's not always something you can explain to people, that there are several parties involved in this management. And we also still need to communicate, yes, we are still doing services in this church. So some people are just not aware of that. So you need basically a lot of communication to explain the situation to people. Thank you, Mrs. Sonnenburg. Let's leave the Christuskirche and Etz Chaim, and now let's come to our next project, which is something with a different history, which is the Kolumbarium, Heiliges Herz Jesu, and the Melanchthonkirche. Now I'd like to present to you, first of all, Johannes KOLLENDA. He is responsible for the Kolumbarium. He's responsible for this process, this transformation, and is now the person in charge of this project, and who's going to talk to us about it. Mr. KOLLENDA, the floor is yours. Yes, thank you. Welcome. I will try to be brief and explain in 5 minutes to show you what the Kolumbarium is and what it looks like. Let me start my presentation. Can you see that? Yes. Yes, well, Kolumbarium is something probably you know. It's a church with urn graves, and this is, there is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. This is a quote from the book of Genesis. But before this transformation, it looked like there was no future for the church at all. And because of the demographic change, many people leaving the church, this church, Herz Jesu, in 2008, was one of the 50 churches in the Diocese of Hildesheim that couldn't be funded anymore, couldn't be financed, and they were meant to be either demolished or sold. And now it's not working. Yes, it is working. Because of this unique architecture of this church that was built in 1905, the congregation of St. Martin in Hanover received the offer by the diocese, if they had an idea for this space, to use it and be responsible for this space. Because they had some positive experience of the first church columbariums in Germany, which was in Erfurt, Aachen, and in Marl, they decided to take over this deconsecrated church, which means that it didn't work, it wasn't a church anymore, and they decided to make it, to turn it into a columbarium, and this is what it looks like today. So we have these urn graves in the form of glass ladders based on the image of the Jacob's ladder. You can see this here at the side with a capacity of 1,300 urn graves. And we see here the main nave to the right nave, and on the left side, it's identical. So what's special is that because the urn graves are all in the sides, on the side naves, it was possible for us to use the space at the front where the altar is, and to really reconsecrate this space as a church or as a chapel, because we have this double use as a columbarium, but also use the sanctuary as a chapel. So we are back to church status for the sanctuary, and it's also a place where graves are kept. So we have a double status, which is really interesting. So the planning was all about the question, how should we design a columbarium so that we meet the needs of the mourners? And we found some answers to this by looking at the some volunteers who are experienced in pastoral care for mourners. They work in this field and they know, based on their knowledge, we included a couple of elements in this columbarium. For example, here at the top, on the left-hand side, you see a room where you can talk to mourners, to family, or maybe you can talk to other peoples if you need pastoral care. This is possible in this room. And the volunteers I've already mentioned, they are active there. They offer talks. You can talk to them, and that people aren't left alone when they mourn. Then there is another room to say goodbye individually in another small room, and you can be alone with the deceased person, and it's also important that you have this personal space. Another important thing is, what do you do when somebody has passed away? What do you do? We have this shrine. We call it the Shrine of Memories, and family mourners, grieving people can put papers in. This is a protected, safe space, and they can just, maybe write a letter and put that in this shrine. And each Friday there is a memorial service for the deceased people, and once per year there's another special service for everybody who passed away over the past year. And this memorial service is then also done in a very special way by our volunteers and the pastoral care specialists. The Kolumbarium offers a space for grief and for saying goodbye, but this old church has become a space where people dead and alive can be together, can be in one congregation, one community. And for example, since the opening, there were also weddings. Some people wanted to be married in this space, or they wanted to baptize their children. So they wanted to do that in the presence of those of their people who were already in that space. They wanted to be in community with everybody, dead or alive. And you can also have concerts, can have a reading, so various uses are possible in this space. So this way we come full circle from death back to life, and this is what we have done with this columbarium. Thank you very much, Mr. Kollenda. That was interesting. So I have one question from the chat. I'd like to ask you, now, is the columbarium Catholic, or do you have any clear denomination? Well, the church itself, the church is a Catholic church. The burials are neutral, but we have two conditions for the burial there, for using it. It can't have it can't be an anonymous burial. We need a name and also the date of the death of the person. And the second condition is, irrespective if somebody is or was active in church, that it is a Christian burial. So we have maybe 1/3 of Catholics, 1/3 Protestants, and 1/3 people who were not religious, maybe people who left the church or who may never have been in the church. We also have other people from other cultures, maybe because at that point the widow said that her husband always accompanied her into church, even if he wasn't Christian himself. Thank you very much. And then the question I'd like to ask you, what about the financial basis for all of this? So can this be paid for?
This was a very important question for us because the diocese said at the beginning, you are not in the church register anymore. We have no money for you anymore. You won't get any money. The solution you can do is that we planned it like a company. We had tax consultants, advisors, and even though our supporting organization is the parish of St. Martin. We have our own, we do our own books, and we communicated that from the beginning to control our financial flows. And we try to do that. If today I sell a place for an urn, for example, then I have to provide I have to provide 20 years of tranquility, basically. So I only have these revenues. Today, if you read the balance sheet, then it looks bad because you have a lot of losses, even though we have the liquidity. So it was really interesting with the church council to tell them everything is okay, but regarding our bookkeeping, our accounting, we have to take into account that we have to provide the service for 20 years. And so we have to distribute our revenues as well over the balance sheets. But to answer directly, yes, it is financially sustainable. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kollenda. Honestly, I have more questions, but I have to look at the time as well. And I would like to hand over now to Mr. BOLDT for the Melanchthonkirche. Mr. BOLDT, I want to present him briefly while he perhaps prepares the presentation. He's an architect in the monument presentation of the monastic chamber of Hanover. He is also the representative for the renovation of the Melanchthonkirche, and he accompanied the project during all of its phases. So we will now see a report from the perspective of a competent church member. Mr. BOLDT, I will hand over to you. Good morning. Thank you, Mrs. Gothe. Can you see this image? Yes, okay. Okay, 5 minutes Melanchthon. I do not have a plan of the neighborhood, but this is the environment of this Melanchthonkirche. It was planned and constructed as an ensemble of kindergarten, parish hall, and church in 1971. You can see the bricks as the supporting material here, which became characteristic. And it's basically a village-like neighborhood in South Hanover. So this church ensemble was planned as the ecclesiastical and civic center. These are this is the core information for the project. The situation in 2006 was that we had a membership decline, and we realized this. This was easy to see, and it shocked us that we saw we had to do something. What the Evangelical Regional Church proposed to reduce the building stock, maybe, and it was clear to us that we have to do something. You can see that 2006, yesterday during the discussion, the Herrenhausen discussion, you could see that the planning processes take a lot longer than the actual construction. I can confirm that from our perspective. So 2006, we started to plan in internal conversations and panels within the church council, which is the responsible committee for such projects. And before going to the next slide, please take a look at the sanctuary here with the characteristic element of the big wooden cross, and to the left and the right, these vents in the side walls. So we reflected on how to do it financially, and then we invited architects, the office Dreibund from Bochum. So the idea was to use this layout of the Greek cross a very, very centralized building to integrate the parsonage and to reduce the building stock. So the parsonage and the parish hall were sold, which of course contributed some financial relief. So this is the floor plan, the layout. The sanctuary, which you just saw, the new uses are basically to the left and to the right. Here we have functional rooms, facilities, and here we have the two arms for the parish office and cooking facilities, and the parsonage and a conference room. So this is what it looks like after the transformation. So we have the view from the sanctuary towards a space which is used for meetings, for conferences. Here we have the church space itself. It is sufficient for the usual Sunday services. If there are big festivities, Easter, Christmas, then this glass wall can be removed, so we can add seats. So all the people who want can have a seat. What's special about this project maybe is that at the end of the project, there was no money anymore. So we did not have money for professional seating. So we asked church members, congregation members, to provide chairs. The pastor called it 100 chairs, 1,000 days. These are long gone these days, but it has been successful. It was very well received. Many members of the congregation offered their favorite chairs. We had to have them give us these chairs, and we had to remove some dangerous, some unstable ones, but it is a great thing for the congregation. You can see the view towards this congregation space. So identity sustaining elements or design elements of the church, it was important for us that they remain, because we strongly transformed this interior space. You remember the brick material. We have now added insulation, which meant that the reverberation time is better for the choirs, for example. And that is basically the fundamental change of the interior space. But we preserved the big wooden cross, these stained glass openings. This is the organ gallery, and here again a view towards the chairs and the interior space. A big change as well is that we have a complete gallery on the second level, so every room can be accessed. The view from above. Of course, you cannot put one chair over another, so they have to remain like this. The view with Christmas decorations. One other element, these were the existing lights, and they have survived the transformation process. So everything was reduced, was scaled down for financial reasons. We made we have a multifunctional church space now. We also lightened or added more light to the sanctuary because of this window above. So we have we've kind of added the seasons to the sanctuary. So during the summer we have a lot of light. So we have a lot of great light and shadow effects, which is a great improvement. Okay, did I forget something? We don't have a lot of time, unfortunately. Okay, so you can see that the character of a central church it has been preserved through these structural elements, and then maybe I would like to explain why this project could be successful. There was agreement on the need for this transformation, even though the personnel changed. And after the call for tenders from the architects, we had a meeting with the congregation where we proposed the project, we presented the need for it, and we basically said we have to do this, but we also had a plan for what we could do. And so the congregation had our back. They supported us, and we also received a lot of donations. So I think such a big project can only be realized with the support of the congregation. I know of other examples where the church council, where there were tensions and disagreements. This is not the case here. And I would also like to add that we were supported by the building office, and that was a great support from beginning to end. So thank you for that to Mr. Krause. And this building remains the center of the community, this anchor point, which has only been strengthened. People have realized how important this building is to them. It has it offers space for profane groups as well as ecclesiastical groups. Due to the pandemic, we also offer our space to other conferences, for proprietors, for example, and we have new cooperations with sports associations. So it is a very vibrant, animated coexistence. There are also community festivities which take place here, food banks, but also flea markets. So it's great that it can have a multifunctional use without this being negative, having negative impacts. I forgot the window. So the window you can see here in the church facade, it was in the upper level, which we opened up towards the ground. So it is a kind of opening to the neighborhood and an interaction between the exterior and the interior. And we used the pandemic to try a service format where the seats were outside and we had the organ playing in the inside. So that was a great interaction between outside and inside, and it shows how diverse this church is and that it was transformed in a constructive way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bolt. Thank you for answering all the questions. As you've answered all my questions I wanted to ask you, so this was really a great comprehensive overview. It was important for us to have among the examples one church which has changed a lot over the past 10 years, which has changed, but which is still a church and is being used as a church. So that's why we included this example. And you included other users, but it's still a church. In the chat, Mr. Krause is answering, who you've just mentioned, is already answering questions regarding the status of the listed building. Thank you, Mr. Krause, for that. So I will not repeat all the questions and answers here in our discussions. Also in the chat, there is quite an enthusiasm for these various elements, mainly for the chairs. Everybody seems to love the chairs. So there were several people who were really enthusiastic about it. Maybe, may I say something? Well, because I forgot something. If you look at the church, yes, welcome. We can do it live. I have 3 things. I've prepared 3 links. I'm going to post them. So you're welcome to visit. So you can contact us. You can contact the congregation You will have the links, and we like to guide you through. On Wikipedia, there's a great collection of photos of the various phases. It's really worthwhile. So have another look. And you can also contact my employer. So can you see it in the chat? If not, you can put it on the website. We will find a way. But now I would like to stop because we still have one more presentation. So now please have the presentation of the Uhlhorn-Kirche, Mrs. Pfitzner, the student dorm. Mrs. Pfitzner you have a model of this building in the background, I believe. So the floor is yours, and we are interested and looking forward to your presentation because this is quite an unusual new use. Yes, thank you, Mrs. Gothe. After all these great examples, this is maybe something quite different because we are talking about a church which is a listed building, but is now used in a profane way. So it's the former Gerhard-Uhlhorn-Kirche. This is in Hannover, in the Linden neighborhood, a very central location, and you can see it in this photo. It was always meant as a landmark, as something that can be seen from everywhere. You have this bridge, you reach the university, it's next to the river, to the Leine, and this is the Linden neighborhood. It's a very lively neighborhood, lots of students who live there. And in this environment, there is a bit of green. So this is the location of the Gerhard-Uhlhorn-Kirche. What's characteristic for this building is, of course, the roof. It's a copper tent roof on a concrete basis, and this special tower. So this has a very interesting form and shape. In 2012, the church was deconsecrated, and then it was up for sale. There were several interested parties. The building is listed, built in 1963 by Rainer Schmidt. It received an award for this design. It's a really special design with great rooms and spaces, and this is what it looked like at the time. We came in 2015 in order to develop a concept for the sale for the developer, Dr. Gerd Weinhoff and Dirk Felsmann. And they were already quite experienced in other cases. And this is the first of two churches that they bought, that they are also were courageous enough to tackle listed buildings. So again, you can see the ceiling, this roof, which is in a form of a tent-shaped, this triangle, and you have glass elements at the front and the concrete base with glass elements, and this creates a very nice and interesting light inside. So we said we could have student apartments, but how can you do that if you don't really have any windows? Then we developed our concept, which led to the sale, which is based on a living together concept. So this was the church from the inside at the time. You can see the beams and the glass windows, the colorful windows with Bible scenes. Then again, you have the facade with the glass elements in the base. And again, you have this very interesting light situation. What you can see, the organ is already missing. The organ used to be here. So some elements had already been taken away and been already sold. So the building was handed over without the organ, without a baptismal font, but with the altar and with a cross. And those two elements stayed inside the church, despite the reuse. So what did we do? This has become a building with 5 apartments. And you can ask 5 apartments, how does that work? If you look at these sketches, at these plan layouts. So this is the ground floor and the first floor. We have 27 rooms for students, and this is one flat. So of course this was a means to get a permit, but still keep and maintain the space the way it was. So you can see the rooms, and this is a double room. And in between you have a communal area, a common room. This is the upper floor, again, more rooms, and again, a kitchen, a common room area. And this is the background that, of course, you have the rooms, and the individual rooms have their own bathrooms and a fridge. Each room has a fridge and a bathroom, but there are 2 common kitchens for everybody. One on the former gallery and one at the ground floor. Here, this is close to the entrance. So right from the start, the monument protection on all levels has been involved. And so they gave us the permit for this use, and we built a huge model. You can see this model in my background. Mrs. Groth already recognized this project. And based on this model, we demonstrated all the measures, all the steps that were to take place. So this very interesting concrete roof, how will that be shaped? How will that be used and integrated? How far can we go? Where do we put the windows? Because again, we had the problem that there were hardly any windows, or we weren't meant to put in too many windows. And each window had to be agreed on. And so you see, if you remember the first image, this is the last version, how it was built. Here you see those slits in the base. These slits have been included into the former glass base. And the idea was, you can see it in the model, it's to have a house inside of the house. So we have 2 shells. We have the outer shell, which is insulated. So each room or each row of rooms is insulated. And then you have something in between. And you have rooms, single rooms, double rooms, with between 13 and 26 square meters each, and 500 square meters common area. Here at the base, it's a bit harder to see towards the river. You have 4 other flats. So in total, we have 5 apartments. So this was something which was quite difficult, that we were able to find a solution between, fire protection, listed building regulations, all the various regulations, and what we needed for the new use. So there were a lot of things to be taken account of. One more thing was the tower, which was also listed, was protected. So we needed another permit for this tower, because the tower is too close. Regarding inside, it's too close to everything else. So we needed another permit to keep that. And this is just one example of why it was so difficult to receive all the necessary permits for this new use. So the interior looks a bit different now. This is again a picture from the early stage. You can see the window behind the cross. We didn't really do it that way after all, but for example here you can see a great roof terrace where you can look at the green space and the bridge. Here we have the neighbors. Then we didn't want to put the terrace there towards the neighbors. So we talked, of course, to the neighbors, and everybody was involved. And this is how we got to this result. You can see the volume. This is the huge tent roof, 21 meters high, with the concrete shell and the wooden beams. This is all still original. You can see, in the contrast to other concepts, in our concept, we didn't try to, use all the space available until the tip, but we wanted to still keep the space as an open space, as a common area. The gallery for the organ had to be maintained. And this is what we found out. So the discussion was interesting. It was really interesting because the building just became more interesting with each turn, with each new decision, and it's become clearer. And here you can see it easily. Here you have the various levels. Here the rooms on the two different levels. Here is the roof terrace, and this is the closed side with the kitchen to the other side. The former winter chapel is behind this line. And my computer always thinks I want to show the next slide, but here we have more rooms there. And we kept the glass art that was in that place. So this is a photo of the construction phase. So everything that we put into this building can also be removed again. So you have the chance to actually reverse the whole thing, because it's a building inside of a building. You can rip out the interior building if you want to. So the original shell is still kept intact. This is again the construction phase. You can see the walls with a wooden construction. You can see the insulation. This is one of the additional windows. And you can hardly see it from the outside, but it will give light. And at the back, you will have the kitchen area. And this is what it looks like today. Now, this was the former winter chapel and the kitchen area on the upper floor. And you can see the colors of the windows that we have kept, because the room can still be experienced in the full height. It's still 21 meters high. And so this is the experience of the room. Just to give you some more impressions, this is the view towards the other side. The cross is still there, but it's behind these pieces of cloth. This is the exit to the roof, and we still have the altar at the bottom. So we changed that a bit, but it's still there. And it's also been covered. It's been covered with another coating. This is the stairs. And again, the glass elements in the base. And this is still kept very in the original form. Again, this is the kitchen area. It's the former organ gallery. This is where we cut through. And this is also the old concrete. And we kept all the elements. We didn't hide anything. So this is really that you can see what it used to be. That's the ground floor. It's still the original floor with the tiles. We are below the organ gallery. To the left is the winter chapel, and this is the bridge situation to the new rooms. And once more, this is the view to the rooms, and at the back you see again the glass elements in the facade with the light elements. Yes, I'm nearly done. We have the room once more. This is one of the bigger rooms, one of the smaller rooms, the kitchen. So we used the pews of the church. We used that for the kitchen. This is the outside view with the individual windows in the roof for the rooms. And again, the rooms at the ground level have a very small outside area. This is an impression from the housewarming party. This was a party with a performance with music that we had. And we invited people to celebrate the opening, which is the former congregation members, the neighbors, the people who were involved in the planning, and of course the future people, the future inhabitants and tenants. So of course they were also invited, and you see how beautiful this room is after the change. Mrs. Pritzner, thank you very much. I'm done. Yes, we'll come back to that. This is how the students live now. They are satisfied. Thank you very much. Welcome to the Uhlhorn Church.